Mid-presentation, my manager cut me off and humiliated me in front of the whole team, tore apart my work like it was trash. She had no idea the client was secretly texting me. Meet me outside in 5 minutes. I was standing in the middle of a conference room in downtown Cleveland, clutching a stack of printed reports so tight my fingers were shaking. The room was dead silent, except for the slow, careful footsteps of the HR director as she walked in with a folder I recognized immediately. The kind they only bring out when someone's about to be destroyed. And all of them were staring at me. My manager, Clara, sat with her arms crossed like she was already bracing for the show. She wouldn't look at me, which was new. Usually she held eye contact like it was a weapon. Across the table, our department VP flipped through the folder with this slow, disappointed sigh that made my stomach drop. I had no idea what I was being accused of, but judging from the way he avoided my eyes, he already believed every word. HR placed the folder in front of me, and when I opened it, my entire body went cold. There it was, a full sequence of time-stamped log entries showing unauthorized data manipulation made under my credentials, massive edits to a client dataset, changes that could ruin our biggest account, changes that would get someone instantly fired, except I hadn't done any of it. I looked up at Clara, and she finally met my eyes. She blinked once, slow and rehearsed, like she'd been preparing to look just concerned enough when this moment came. That's when the room started spinning. I couldn't tell if I was sweating or freezing. My brain was scrambling, trying to make sense of it. Last night, I'd left the office at 8 p.m. I locked my workstation. I logged out. Nothing I saw in that folder matched anything I touched. But someone had used my login, and HR was acting like the case was already closed. "Before you say anything," the HR director said, folding her hands neatly, "we want you to know we've taken this very seriously." My throat tightened. "I didn't do this." Another disappointed sigh from the VP. Then Clara leaned forward, putting on this soft, fake sympathetic voice I'd heard her use on junior employees right before tearing them apart. "Tegan, maybe you made a mistake and forgot. You've been overwhelmed lately. It happens." The way she said my name made something inside me snap. She was lying. There wasn't even a crack of doubt in her tone. She was already positioning herself as the responsible, level-headed one, the one who caught the issue, the hero. HR slid another page toward me, a printout of the building's access logs. My keycard was used at 11:42 p.m. I stared at it like it might change if I looked long enough. "I wasn't here," I whispered. Clara shrugged with practiced sadness. "Maybe you don't remember." But that's when something struck me, a tiny, sharp detail I might have missed if my panic hadn't shifted, just for a second, into anger. HR had one more page in that folder, half-covered. But I recognized the layout. It wasn't an access report. It was a device registry log, and my laptop had been registered as active long after I left, except I had taken it home. It was sitting on my couch right now. My heart started pounding so hard I could barely hear my own breathing. Someone had cloned my device credentials. Someone had set me up. And the one person who knew exactly how, because I'd literally trained her on our system's last quarter, was sitting across from me pretending to be heartbroken for me. Before I could say a word, HR said, "We'll need your phone and laptop. Effective immediately, you're suspended pending further investigation." Clara looked down, fake trembling lip and all, like she couldn't bear to witness this. But I looked at her, and she wasn't trembling. She was smiling, just barely, but she was smiling. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't a mistake. It wasn't some mix-up. It wasn't stress or confusion or a technical glitch. This had been planned, and Clara wanted me gone. Badly. I opened my mouth to call her out, but then the elevator dinged outside the conference room, and the person who stepped out made Clara's face drain of color. I didn't know who she was yet, but she looked directly at Clara, and Clara looked terrified. I met Clara Walsh, no relation to me, thank God 2 years ago when she transferred from our Chicago office to take over as team lead for data compliance. Back then, she seemed sharp, polished, and a little too eager to point out mistakes that didn't exist. But she smiled a lot, and she talked like someone who'd read every How to Sound Like a Leader book ever written. People liked her. I tried to. What I didn't expect was how fast she'd zero in on me. It started small. She'd drop into my workstation area with this tight smile and say things like, "Your notes are thorough. almost too thorough. You don't have trouble keeping up, do you? Or, most people at your level don't double-check everything. It can make you seem unsure. It was weird. I'd never had a manager care so much about the tone of my documentation. But she'd frame it as coaching, so I'd force a smile and say thanks. Honestly, before her, I loved my job. It wasn't glamorous, just data governance for a healthcare software company in Cleveland. But I liked being the person the engineers trusted when they weren't sure how a dataset interacted with compliance rules. I liked the structure of it, the clarity. I liked knowing the answers. Clara, though, was obsessed with perception. She'd say it wasn't enough to be good, you had to control the narrative. She dropped that line so often it could have been a tattoo. Still, we got along well enough. At least at first. Things changed the month she got put on rotation for the company's biggest client, Havenbrook Medical Systems. Their data was a mess, years of patchwork edits, broken audit trails, undocumented overrides, a nightmare for compliance analysts, but a goldmine for someone who wanted to look like a hero. I was assigned as the technical lead on the cleanup because I'd spent a year building a toolset to untangle these exact kinds of disasters. Clara called it Tegan's bag of sorcery. She said it in this joking tone that felt off, like she didn't like that I'd built something she couldn't fully explain herself. Anyway, the first few weeks of the project, she was right there with me, asking questions, taking notes, learning how the audit chains worked. It actually felt good, like she respected me, like we were a team. Then she started changing. First, she'd forget to invite me to client calls. Then she'd accidentally send reports without my name on them. Then she'd start presenting my findings in meetings using phrases I had written word for word in my internal memos. I only noticed because I organize my notes obsessively. Her version was too perfect to be coincidence. I confronted her once, gently, like maybe it really had been an oversight. She gave me that smile that never reached her eyes and said, "Oh, Tegan, you have to stop being so sensitive. No one cares about who wrote what. What matters is that the team shines." But it never felt like the team was shining. Just her. My coworkers started treating her like the golden child of compliance, the woman who revitalized the Havenbrook account. No one questioned it because Clara knew how to present confidence like it was fact. And if she didn't know something, she'd nudge me in meetings with that subtle hand gesture I learned to interpret as, "Tegan, jump in. Make me look capable." And I always did. Because I thought that was what you were supposed to do when your manager trusted you. Then there was the night I stayed late with her, going through the last of the corrupted Havenbrook logs. She ordered us takeout, told me she appreciated my dedication, and said promotions were coming in the next quarter. I remember feeling proud, seen, like maybe all the weird behavior had been in my head. But the next morning, every one of my scripts, the custom validations, the duplicate record finder, the rollback generator, had been migrated to her folder, with her name on them. She brushed it off when I asked about it. "Oh, it must have reorganized something. Don't overthink it." That was the first time I felt something colder than irritation. I felt used, but I still didn't understand how far she'd go. Not until the week before that conference room ambush, when I started noticing tiny things out of place. My chair a few inches off, my monitor at a different angle, a login timestamp I didn't recognize. I told myself I was just tired, that everyone gets paranoid during major client deadlines. But I wasn't paranoid. I was being hunted. And the woman who stepped into that conference room, the one whose arrival made Clara turn white, was the first sign that someone else already knew. The woman who stepped into the conference room that morning didn't belong to our floor. You could tell instantly. She moved like someone who didn't answer to anybody in that building, calm, direct, the kind of presence that makes everyone else sit up straighter without knowing why. She was in her mid-50s, tall, wearing a slate blue blazer and no-name badge. That alone was strange. Everyone in our building wore badges, even the CEO. But she walked in without hesitation, gave HR a polite nod, and then fixed her eyes on Clara with this slow, deliberate look that made my skin prickle. The VP stood up so fast his chair screeched. "Miss Donnelly," he said, voice tight. "We weren't expecting," she raised a hand. "I know, continue." No one continues when someone that's senior walks in. But no one was going to challenge her either. HR cleared her throat, clearly rattled. "We were reviewing disciplinary documentation for Miss Walsh." The woman, Evelyn Donnelly, apparently, turned her head toward me and studied me in this unsettling but not unkind way. Like she was cataloging details. Like she already knew something I didn't. Then she asked, "Tegan, what time did you leave last night?" I blinked. "A little after 8. And you took your laptop home?" "Yes," she nodded. "Thank you." Just that calm, neutral. Then she walked to the table, leaned in slightly, and tapped the page showing my alleged 11:42 p.m. login. "Fascinating," she murmured. "Because building security confirms there was no camera activity on the 14th floor elevator bank after 10 p.m. Clara stiffened. HR frowned. "We hadn't checked that yet." "Apparently not," Evelyn said quietly. Her tone wasn't angry. It was worse, disappointed, like she expected competence and wasn't finding it. Clara straightened in her chair, finally recovering her voice. "We can't draw conclusions from one missing camera angle." "Camera angle? No," Evelyn said, eyes narrowing. "But entry logs, badge resets, and cloned device fingerprints." "Yes," I felt my pulse spike. "Cloned fingerprints," I repeated. Evelyn eased into the chair at the far end of the table, the head seat, and the VP looked like he'd swallowed his tongue. She was definitely above him, and probably above his boss, too. She set down a slim tablet, tapped the screen, and projected an access deviation chart onto the wall. It was clean, simple, and terrifyingly clear. Someone had remotely authenticated my device using a terminal ID tied to an internal machine we weren't even supposed to have access to. HR stared at the data. "How did you get?" "Because I asked," Evelyn said. "And because internal audit has been tracking abnormalities on this project for the past 6 months." My stomach dropped. 6 months. Clara went still. The VP rubbed his temples. "Why wasn't I notified of this?" Evelyn gave him a pointed, too sweet smile. "You were, 3 times. You simply didn't read what was sent." The silence that followed was suffocating. My hands were sweating now, but my mind was finally clearing. Something was wrong on a scale I hadn't understood. Something bigger than stolen credit. Bigger than workplace sabotage. "This," Evelyn said, raising her voice just slightly, "is the 4th attempted credential clone connected to the Havenbrook account. All tied to nights where internal access spikes were recorded, but no corresponding employee presence was logged in the building." She slid her gaze back to me. "And all attributed to you, Miss Walsh." My breath caught. Not because I was surprised, but because everything suddenly clicked. Every off comment. Every accidental reassignment of my scripts. Every forgotten meeting. Every time Clara positioned herself as the one holding things together. She wasn't climbing the ladder. She was building a trap. While I was sitting frozen in my own shock, Evelyn stood up and closed the HR folder with a firm, almost dismissive motion. "This suspension is revoked," she said. "Effective immediately," Clara jolted. "What? You can't just—" "I can," Evelyn cut in. "And I will." Then she leaned over the table, hands braced, and said calmly, "There is a far larger problem inside this department, and I intend to find out exactly who built it." Clara opened her mouth to speak, but then someone else walked into the room, and when I saw who it was, my entire world tilted, because it wasn't another executive. It was my coworker Dan, the quiet, mild-mannered analyst who always stayed late, never complained, and had once told me he owed his entire career to Clara's generosity. Except he wasn't looking generous now. He looked terrified, and he refused to meet my eyes. When Dan stepped inside the conference room, he looked like he'd sprinted the whole way. His glasses were fogged, his hair was sticking up like he'd been yanking at it, and his hands were shoved deep into the pockets of his khakis like he was trying to keep them from shaking. He didn't even glance at me. Not once. That told me everything before anyone said a word. Clara's expression flickered just enough panic to break through her polished facade, then she plastered on a smile so quick it almost looked painful. "Oh, Dan," she said, voice chirpy and brittle. "You didn't need to come up here." Evelyn turned her head slowly toward him. "You were the one who requested this meeting, correct?" Dan swallowed hard, Adam's apple jerking. "Why, yes, ma'am." Requested. My heart slammed against my ribs so hard it hurt. I looked at him, this man who always offered to help me carry boxes, who brought donuts on Fridays, who once said he admired how I never let anyone take advantage of me, and he refused to look anywhere but at the floor. HR gestured toward an empty chair. "Please have a seat." But Dan stayed standing. He kept rubbing his thumbs together like he was trying to erase fingerprints. Evelyn's voice softened, but not warmly, more like a knife getting wiped clean. Dan, you told internal audit you had information relevant to the credential tampering. Clara shot up from her chair so fast it nearly toppled. What? He's confused. He's been under a lot of pressure lately. Haven't you, Dan? We talked about this? The desperation in her voice was unmistakable. She wasn't protecting him. She was trying to contain him. Dan finally lifted his eyes, not toward me, but toward Evelyn. His voice was barely above a whisper. I have logs. The room went dead silent. Evelyn leaned forward. Logs of what? He wiped his palms on his pants. Terminal pings, device handshakes, remote authentications routed through subnode terminals. The VP frowned. We don't have subnode terminals. That's the point, Dan said, voice cracking. We're not supposed to. Clara's face drained. Stop talking. But he didn't. He reached into his backpack with trembling hands and pulled out a flash drive. He held it like it might burn him. I didn't want to be part of this, he whispered. But she said if I didn't help her, she'd tell everyone I falsified my onboarding certifications. She said she'd ruin me. She said one word from her, and it would take away my access permanently. My stomach twisted. She had threatened him. But then his voice cracked again, this time aimed right at me. And she said you'd never believe me anyway. My breath froze. Evelyn took the flash drive, plugged it into her tablet, and the screen on the wall lit up. Rows and rows of access logs appeared, timestamps, device IDs, and remote authentication calls traced back to a hidden terminal. SN14B, a terminal registered under Clara's management ID. Every single cloned login, including the ones using my credentials, had been routed through that machine. But there was something else. At the bottom of the logs, highlighted in sickening red, script migration event, origin. Walsh T workstation right arrow destination. Walsh C repository my scripts. The ones she said it had reorganized. The ones I spent months building. The ones she used to make herself look brilliant. There it was, documented, proven, undeniable. Clara lunged across the table, slamming the laptop shut so hard the sound cracked through the room. This is absurd, she screamed. He's lying. He's always been unstable. Dan flinched like he'd been slapped, but Evelyn didn't even blink. She looked at Clara the way a surgeon looks at a tumor. Miss Walsh, she said quietly, you forgot something. Clara froze. Evelyn tapped the dark laptop lid. This device belonged to our previous department head. It records every login attempt, even failed ones. She looked her dead in the eye. And it shows you access that subnode terminal. Repeatedly. Clara didn't breathe. No one did. Then Evelyn turned to me, and her next words changed everything. Tegan, she said, you weren't the target of a smear campaign. She paused. You were the cover. A chill shot down my spine. Clara's head snapped toward her. Don't you dare. But Evelyn continued, unbothered. She wasn't framing you because she hated you. She was framing you because you were the only employee whose credentials were advanced enough to hide what she was really doing. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. What was she doing? I whispered. Evelyn looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, embezzlement. The room erupted. HR gasped. The VP cursed under his breath. Dan sank into a chair like his bones collapsed, but I didn't move. Because Clara was smiling. A slow, horrible, knowing smile. Like this was all just the beginning. I didn't remember leaving the conference room. 1 minute Clara was smiling like she'd won something I couldn't even name, and the next I was sitting alone in a tiny focus space down the hall, hands trembling so hard I had to tuck them under my thighs just to stop them. Embezzlement, not incompetence, not petty sabotage, not stolen credit. She had used me not because she wanted me gone, but because she needed a shield, a scapegoat. A clean, hardworking, rule-following analyst to hide behind while she rerouted client funds through subnode terminals no one even knew existed. And she'd started 6 months ago. 6 months of me trying to prove myself to her. 6 months of her coaching me. 6 months of letting her steer me like a puppet because I thought she saw potential in me. I felt sick. I don't know how long I sat there before someone knocked. It was Evelyn. She closed the glass door behind her and didn't bother sitting. She just looked at me for a moment like she was figuring out whether I was about to break or take the next step. Are you okay? She asked. I almost laughed. No, good, she said. If you were calm right now, I'd worry. That was the first moment I saw something human in her, a flicker of understanding. Not pity, she didn't strike me as someone who pitied anyone, but recognition. Like she'd seen this play out before, maybe been in my shoes once. She leaned against the wall, arms crossed. We're not done, not even close. My pulse kicked up. What else is there? Clara didn't act alone, Evelyn said. There's a trail of discrepancies in the Havenbrook account that suggest at least 2 other employees processed her data overrides. Dan was one of them, but he wasn't the only one. I swallowed, throat tight. So what do you need from me? She pushed off the wall and stood in front of me, lowering her voice. Your help catching her in a way that leaves no escape routes. I stared at her. You want me to, what? Go undercover? Not undercover, she said. Just smart. She pulled a thin black folder from her bag and laid it on the small table. Inside were 3 documents: a chain of custody authorization, a data variance report template, and an IT escalation form. I can authorize a full forensic sweep, she said. But if Clara realizes what's happening, she'll destroy whatever she has left before we can get to it. She's already panicking. That makes her sloppy, but it also makes her dangerous. I felt that last word in my bones, dangerous. In all the chaos, I hadn't allowed myself to process that part, that Clara wasn't just ambitious or manipulative. She was capable of anything. I forced myself to breathe. So what do you want me to do? I want her to think she still has control, Evelyn said. For one more day. That was the moment something inside me shifted. I'd spent months reacting to Clara, apologizing, adjusting, second-guessing, shrinking myself to avoid conflict she weaponized anyway. I was done with that. Tell me exactly what you need, I said, voice steadier than I expected. A small smile tugged at the corner of Evelyn's mouth. Approval, respect, something I hadn't realized I'd been starved for. She sat across from me, opened the folder, and pointed to the first page. You're going to file a routine data anomaly report. Nothing special, nothing suspicious. It'll hit the compliance queue automatically. Clara will see it first. She'll know I'm on to her. No, Evelyn said. She'll think she scared you into doing cleanup work to save your own job. I blinked. That's actually believable. It's exactly what she expects. Evelyn tapped the other document. Meanwhile, it will be watching the subnode terminal. If she touches it even once, we'll have Trace ID confirmation tied to her login. And if she doesn't? I asked. Evelyn looked me dead in the eyes. She will. Her confidence sent a cold ripple through me, not fear, but the realization that we were walking her straight into a trap she wouldn't see until it snapped shut. I nodded. Okay. What about Dan? He gave us the logs, he's protected now. But you, she hesitated. You need to stay predictable, don't confront her, don't signal anything, just do your work. My mind was racing now, connecting dots I hadn't dared to before. So you're using me as bait. Evelyn didn't deny it. We're using her arrogance, she corrected. You're just the one she never saw coming. I exhaled, long and shaky. Then something else slipped into place. Something darker, sharper, more personal. If Clara had been building a fraud scheme this big, what else was she hiding? What else had she used my credentials for? What else had she planned to pin on me? The thought chilled me, and it made something inside me harden. I'll do it, I said. Evelyn nodded. Good. She stood, ready to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing, she said quietly. Be careful around her. People who get cornered don't think logically. The door clicked shut behind her, and suddenly I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry. But before I could stand, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Don't tell anyone. Dan. I stared at the message, heart racing again for a totally different reason. Because one thing was suddenly very clear. He hadn't told us everything. I met Dan in the parking garage beneath our building because he insisted it couldn't be anywhere they log conversations. He said, like there were more enemies than just Clara, which should have been my first warning. The place was dim and echoey, lit by flickering fluorescents that hummed like angry insects. Cars were scattered in uneven patterns, early departures, late arrivals, and the cold November air hit my face as soon as I stepped out of the elevator. I wrapped my blazer tighter around me. Dan was standing between 2 concrete pillars, wringing his hands so hard it looked painful. When he saw me, he jolted like he'd been caught stealing. Thank you for coming, he whispered. You texted me from an unknown number, I said. What's going on? He scanned the space around us as if expecting someone to emerge from behind a car. This can't get back to Evelyn. That threw me. What? Why? He stepped closer. Too close, because she doesn't know everything. My gut tightened. Dan, what do you mean? He swallowed, then pulled something from his pocket, a small black USB stick taped shut with a strip of medical adhesive. Not office tape, not electrical tape, medical tape. Clara didn't start this, he said, voice trembling. She inherited it. I stared at him. Inherited what? He pressed the USB into my hand. The system, the whole thing, the subnode terminals, the altered billing funnels, the data reroutes, all of it. My heart skipped painfully. You told us she created those terminals. I lied, he whispered. Because if I told them the real origin, they wouldn't stop at her. My mouth went dry. Dan, who built the system. He finally met my eyes, and the terror behind his glasses was real. Evelyn, he said. I felt the ground tilt. No, I said automatically. No, she's the one investigating all this. He shook his head violently. She's the one who built it. A cold shock rippled from the base of my spine to my fingertips. The garage suddenly felt too wide, too empty, too exposed. Dan kept talking, words spilling out in panicked bursts. Years ago, before you were hired, she ran a special project for Havenbrook, a pilot program. They called it a shadow audit structure, off-book compliance, quicker, cleaner, less oversight. It was supposed to be temporary, but it turned into a side channel. Money went through it, a lot of money. I stared at him. But Evelyn just exposed Clara. Because Clara messed it up, he said. She got greedy. She started siphoning more than she was supposed to. She used your credentials to cover it. And Evelyn, she wanted someone to blame when the numbers stopped adding up. A wave of nausea hit me. You're saying, this whole time, she hasn't been helping me. No, he whispered. She's been containing you. My grip tightened around the USB. Why give this to me? He backed up, scared of his own decision. Because you're the only one who isn't part of this. You're clean, you always have been. But if you go to her with any of this, his voice cracked. She'll crush you, she'll bury every piece of evidence, she'll make you disappear from the record entirely. I felt a cold, sharp clarity sliding into place, the same clarity I'd felt when they accused me in that conference room. Only this time, it wasn't confusion or shock. It was the realization that I was in the center of something massive, something dangerous, something that didn't just involve office politics or corporate sabotage, something criminal. And I was standing beside the only whistleblower too terrified to breathe. I took a step closer to him. Dan, why now? Why tell me all of this? His voice dropped to a whisper so thin I almost missed it. Because yesterday she told Clara to get rid of you, permanently. My blood went cold. What does that mean? He looked at me with haunted eyes. It means the suspension wasn't the plan, the frame-up wasn't the plan. He swallowed hard. It means you weren't supposed to walk out of that investigation today. Silence. Thick, suffocating silence. I thought of the folder, the fabricated logs, the cloned credentials. The way Clara smiled like she was already celebrating my downfall. The way Evelyn said I was the perfect cover. I thought of how close I'd come to signing papers that would have ended my career. And then something inside me snapped into place. A new target, a new enemy, a new level of betrayal I hadn't imagined until right now. I slipped the USB into my pocket. Dan, I said quietly, you need to go home. Leave work early, don't talk to anyone, and if Evelyn calls... I won't answer, he said quickly. For the first time he looked relieved, but me, I wasn't relieved, I was planning. Because the person I had thought was my lifeline was actually the one holding the knife. I barely slept that night. I just lay on my couch in my dark apartment in Cleveland, staring at the ceiling while Dan's words kept replaying in this looping, sickening rhythm. She built the system. She wanted someone to blame. You weren't supposed to walk out today. Every time I tried to breathe, another possibility slammed into me. If Evelyn really had created the off-book pipeline, if Clara had inherited it, if the clone logs and altered billing routes went back years, then this wasn't some rogue manager gone crooked. This was the top. This was rot in the foundation. And I was the idiot who had almost trusted the architect. By morning, after hours of going over every memory of Evelyn, every calculating pause, every too-perfect explanation, every moment she inserted herself into the situation without ever asking permission, something inside me finally snapped into clarity. I needed the truth, no more guessing, no more doubts, No more hoping someone in authority actually cared about justice. I was done being the naive one. So when Evelyn texted me at 7:14 a.m., "Need you in early. We continue today," I didn't respond. I walked straight into her glass-walled corner office at 8:03 a.m., shut the door behind me and locked it. She looked up from her laptop, mildly surprised. "You're early." I stepped closer. "Why didn't you tell me about the earlier anomalies, the ones from before Clara took over?" Her fingers paused on the keyboard. "You've been digging," she said quietly. I didn't answer. She leaned back in her chair, crossed one leg over the other, and gave me this slow, measuring look. The same expression she'd worn during the investigation, analytical, steady, predatory. Like she was waiting to see how much I already knew. "Dan talked," I said. The corner of her mouth twitched. Not fear, not shock, annoyance. "I told Clara he was weak," she muttered, almost to herself. My stomach clenched. She wasn't even pretending anymore. "You built the subnode terminal," I said. "You ran the shadow audit program. Clara just followed your blueprint." Evelyn sighed, long, slow, bored. "Correct." My pulse hammered. "You used my credentials to hide the discrepancies." "No," she said calmly. "Clara used them, sloppily. She stopped understanding the system. She got greedy, she threatened the balance." I stared at her. "Balance," she stood up. And the moment she did, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Tegan," she said, stepping around her desk, "you work in data compliance. You know how this industry functions. Healthcare contracts are money machines. Billing codes, variance routing, write-offs, it's all numbers. And numbers are only as real as the people who verify them." She walked to the window overlooking downtown Cleveland, the same skyline I used to think was comforting. "It started as a correction," she said. "Havenbrook underpaid, we adjusted. Then they overbilled, we corrected again. But when you handle millions of dollars in corrections, you start to notice the ease of movement, the flexibility, the opportunity." She turned back toward me, eyes bright with something cold and triumphant. "You call it fraud, I call it optimization." I felt my skin crawl. "People's medical billing is chaos," she snapped. "Sloppy, duplicated. Incomplete, our system fixed all of it. And yes, profit came with that, a well-deserved profit." I stepped back. "So Clara helped you skim from the clients?" Evelyn scoffed. "Clara helped herself. She had no discipline. She inflated numbers without understanding how to maintain the ecosystem. That put everything at risk." "And me?" I asked. "What was I to you?" She smiled. A slow, chilling curve of her lips that hit me harder than anything Clara had ever done. "You were ideal," she said. "Quiet, obedient, skilled, invisible. The perfect passive variable." My hands curled into fists. "You used me." "I used your predictability," she corrected. "Clara needed a shield, I needed a fail-safe." "You were both." The worst part wasn't her words, it was her tone. Flat, casual, completely devoid of remorse. "You would have let me take the fall," I whispered. "If necessary," she said. But Clara moved too soon. Sloppy, emotional. She compromised the structure. And when she did, it became more efficient to cut her out and replace her with someone more competent. My voice cracked. "Me? Yes," she said. "You." Everything inside me went ice cold. "You were going to promote me," I said, "while using me as your front." "Front," she said dismissively. "Figurehead, same thing." My breath stuttered. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Tegan, you should understand something. People like Clara are ambitious. People like you are useful, but people like me," she tilted her head, "we are necessary." I felt like I was suffocating. "And Dan?" I asked, barely able to say it. "Disposable," she said simply. The word hit me like a punch. Every moral thread in my body snapped. Because now I understood everything. Clara sabotaged me because she was desperate. Evelyn set me up because she was strategic. And the two of them weren't enemies. They were different versions of the same monster. One sloppy, one precise, both lethal. And I was standing in front of someone who wasn't afraid of consequences. Someone who believed she was untouchable. My voice came out low, flat, unfamiliar. "You're going to regret telling me all of this." Evelyn laughed, actually laughed. "No, Tegan," she said softly. "You're going to regret hearing it." But she was wrong. Because in that moment, I stopped being scared. And I started calculating. I walked out of Evelyn's office that morning feeling strangely calm, like my nerves had gone quiet so my brain could finally start working. Not panicking. Not spiraling. Planning, cold planning. Because now I didn't just need to survive Clara. I needed to take down Evelyn, the architect, without her sensing it, without her flipping the table, without her burying the evidence, or Dan, or me. And there was only one way to beat someone who believed she was untouchable: make her expose herself. Publicly. Irreversibly. In front of the only people she answered to. By lunchtime, things were already in motion. I started with a simple move: the anomaly report Evelyn told me to file. I filled it out exactly the way she expected: thorough but nervous, careful but apologetic. A scared employee trying to save her job. But I submitted it one level higher in the system, into a queue Evelyn didn't monitor. Then I forwarded a duplicate version to Clara's inbox and added one thing I knew would set her off. A tiny, meticulously crafted line in the notes: potential routing inconsistencies may trace to supervisory oversight. Clara read, "Supervisory oversight, as I'm going to expose you." Exactly as intended. 5 minutes later, she stormed out of her office. 10 minutes after that, she accessed the subnode terminal. It caught every keystroke. She had just walked herself into Evelyn's trap. But that wasn't the real goal. The real goal was getting Evelyn to panic. So while Clara was frantically trying to cover her tracks, I took the USB Dan gave me, the one he was terrified to keep, and walked it straight to corporate internal risk, a department so far above Evelyn's division she couldn't touch them. I told them there had been a whistleblower breach tied to executive misconduct and active fraud. They didn't blink. They didn't question me. They just took the USB, signed a chain of custody receipt, and forwarded everything to the general counsel. Once that happened, the countdown began. At 3:42 p.m., the bomb went off. I was at my desk when the alert hit every executive's inbox simultaneously. Mandatory emergency audit meeting, 10 minutes. Attendance required. Clara came stumbling out of her office, pale and sweating. Evelyn walked out of hers like she was strolling into a brunch. I followed them into the big conference room, the one with the wide windows, the long table, the seats arranged by hierarchy. But this time I didn't sit along the wall. I sat at the table. General counsel entered, then internal risk, then 2 board members. When everyone was seated, counsel placed a stack of printed logs and flagged files onto the table. "Miss Donnelly," counsel said to Evelyn, "would you like to explain the subnode routing discovered this morning?" Evelyn didn't blink. "Of course, that's part of an old audit toolset," counsel cut her off. "With terminal IDs matching your credential build from 2019. Silence. Everyone turned toward her. Her jaw clenched. Clara looked like she was going to faint. She kept glancing between Evelyn and the door, as if deciding whether to run. Then counsel placed another sheet on the table. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Clara's. It was Evelyn's, her financial summary, showing unexplained account transfers connected to private vendors. Evelyn's mask finally cracked, and that was when internal risk dropped the final blow. The whistleblower evidence was delivered by an employee you attempted to suspend earlier today. "Miss Walsh, do you wish to speak?" Every head turned to me, including hers. I met Evelyn's eyes, those sharp, calculating, predatory eyes, and watched them flicker with something she had never felt in that office before: fear. My voice came out steady. "Everything Clara did, she learned from you. You built the system, you used my credentials, you planned to frame me, and when Clara lost control, you planned to replace her with someone you thought would stay quiet." A murmur spread around the table like a ripple. I leaned forward. "But I'm not quiet," Clara suddenly broke, pointing at Evelyn. "She made me do it. She said it was the only way to get promoted." "And you believed her," I said, "because she knows how to find the weak ones." Evelyn slammed her hand on the table. "Enough," but counsel wasn't listening. Security entered the room, 2 officers, real ones. "Evelyn Donnelly," counsel said, "you are hereby placed on administrative detainment pending criminal investigation into fraud, embezzlement, and data tampering. Please stand." For a moment, I thought she might try something, deny it, flip the table, destroy someone with words. But she didn't. She looked at me, just me, and whispered, "You have no idea what you've started." Then they escorted her out. Clara tried to slip out behind them, but another officer stopped her. "Miss Walsh, you'll need to come with us as well." The look she gave me, shock, betrayal, disbelief, meant nothing. She'd built her career hurting people. But she chose the wrong person to pin everything on. I didn't watch her leave. I didn't need to. The fallout took 3 weeks. Evelyn, terminated, charged, facing years in prison. Clara, fired, barred from the industry, under investigation. Dan, granted whistleblower protection and transferred to a safer department. Me, exonerated. On the final day of the audit, the VP came to my desk with a thin folder and an awkward, humbled tone. Tegan, we'd like to offer you the position of Compliance Systems Supervisor. Not because they were generous, not because they suddenly cared about fairness, but because I was the only person who understood the mess well enough to rebuild it honestly. I took it, not for them, for me, for what I survived, for what I tore down. My new office isn't big, but it's mine. The door closes quietly. The city looks calmer from up here. Sometimes I think about Clara's fake smile. Sometimes I think about Evelyn's cold logic. Sometimes I think about how close I came to losing everything because powerful people thought I was small enough to sacrifice. They don't think that anymore. Not after the day I burned their whole empire down from the inside. And the best part, all I had to do was stop being predictable.